What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Bass Fishing Declassified. In this video, I want to share a new hook that I designed for core tackle that's going to change the way you fish a wacky rig in 2025. Let's get into it. This is a new core tackle weedless wacky shot hook. You may have seen the original wacky shot hook I designed for core tackle last year, and that hook had a spring that was attached to a piece of lead that sticks off from the bottom of a finesse wide gap hook. The original wacky shot hook worked great with a standard Senko style bait, but also on these ball or dice style baits that have the jig skirts sticking out of them. This hook had a lot of advantages to it, but one thing is that it wasn't great at coming through cover because you basically have just a big exposed hook on top of your plastic. I wanted to try to figure out then a way to make this hook a little bit more weedless, and so we had to make a few changes. The first modification we made was to change the position of the hitchhiker on this hook. We had a custom-made oversized hitch hanger designed specifically for the wacky shot that holds on your plastic a lot better than the standard hitchhiker. You can just screw that plastic onto that little wire keeper and you can skip it around docks all day and it's not going to fly off like it will with a standard O-ring setup or just hooking the bait through the middle, especially with these Senkos that are super soft and easy to rip apart. The main issue with the original wacky shot design is because the hitchhiker was positioned below the hook shank, it basically made it so that the entire hook is exposed, and if you got around any grass or wood or rocks, it would hang up really easily. But by redistributing where that hitchhiker is on the hook, and instead of putting it below the hook shank, putting it on the hook shank, the bait keels differently and also doesn't get hung up in grass and wood as easily, which allows it to actually come over cover naturally, even without the need for a weed guard. But to make sure that it was even more weedless, we did add a single cable guard weed guard, which is my favorite type of weed guard for trying to work a bait through wood specifically. This is actually the first weedless wacky rig hook I've ever thrown that I can actually throw in the middle of a brush pile and literally work it through like a Texas rig or like my Fish Moment offshore jig. It comes straight through brush, no problem. You can also throw it in the middle of a big grass bed, come through the grass no problem, and literally work it through the thickest grass you can find without it getting hung up. It's absolutely wild how effective this weed guard plus the kind of changing of that little spring, how it makes a huge difference in how weedless this bait is. And it's the point now where it's basically like a 4x4 of a wacky rig setup. You can throw it into any cover you want and it's going to come back to you. And it's completely changed the way that I actually throw a wacky rig. When we first designed that wacky shot, I was mainly targeting fish more in open water, a lot of times using forward-facing sonar, targeting fish that were kind of suspended out in front of brush, or around grass. But I didn't want to get that bait down into the grass because, again, it get hung up. And even with other weedless wacky rig hooks that are on the market, the weed guards are so soft or basically so ineffective that you're going to get hung up on the grass and the brush no matter what you do. But again, with this hook, I can actually basically drop this bait in the middle of a grass patch or the middle of a brush pile and just sit there and just shake it and hold it in place, move it a little bit, sit there and shake it without worrying about getting that bait hung up. And by actually getting a wacky rig setup that just sits in those fish's face in that thick cover, I get so many more bites than I do on a standard jig, shaky head Texas rig, or even a drop shot in those scenarios. The other great advantage of that wacky shot hook is that it has a unique fall to any other hook that is on the market. By positioning that weight closer to the body of the soft plastic bait, it has a different vibration, a small like micro vibration to it that looks different in the water, but it also falls in a way so that when you twitch your rod, it pulls the bait up but not really forward. It's kind of interesting. The bait, when you pull it, will almost like suspend in place. And that's one of the things I loved about the original wacky shot hook is I could fish it on forward-facing sonar, just give it just barely a tight line and just kind of shake it. And that weight would move the bait in a way that it would like kind of fall some semi backwards. And then when I pulled it forward, it would just kind of give just enough resistance that bait stays suspended in the water column. It's really hard to explain until you guys try it, but it's almost like a suspended worm that you can just hold in place. And it's just because of how that weight is positioned and how that weight is relative to the worm. So in a lot of cases, I can fish it the same way I would fish almost like a suspending jerkbait, like a Megabass Vision 110. You can just sit that worm right in front of those fish's face, shake it with a, just a barely tight line with just enough slack that you can wiggle the bait back and forth, and those fish go crazy for it. My go-to baits on this, especially with this weedless version, have been just a regular Gary Yamamoto Senko, as well as some bigger worms, whether that is like a 7 to 10 inch straight tail worm. The bigger, longer worms work better in the summertime for me, but as we get into these winter months, these 5 and maybe even like 4 inch Senko baits are going to be what you want to throw with this weedless Wacky shot. Unfortunately, with this new design, with having the hook or the spring on that hook, you're not going to be able to use these dice baits or cube baits as easily, but we still have the original Wacky shot hook that's still in production, and you can get that for those dice style baits. But in my opinion, if you're going to be throwing a standard Senko style bait, definitely go with the weedless Wacky shot. It's more versatile and helps you come through cover better, which is usually where you're going to throw these stick baits anyways. And it's my new favorite hook from Core Tackle by a country mile. I catch so many fish on it. And one thing I haven't mentioned actually is the hook that's in this bait. The hook we're using is actually a Trocar Nako style hook. Trocar hooks are extremely sharp. It's a premium hook, and so the bait's going to be, or the hooks are going to be a little bit pricey just because we have a premium American-made hook in this bait. But these hooks are produced, the baits are poured, and then everything is assembled here in the US. We ship everything out of the US. Everything is here in the US. So that is, small price to pay to support all of the US companies that are putting their efforts into this rig. And the other thing about that Trocar hook that's really important is that it has a flat spot or kind of a straight spot on the hook shank rather than being fully rounded, which allows us to rig the bait properly on that keeper. So this hook is the perfect hook for this rig, and I don't know, guys, I just love this thing. I love looking at it. It's so cool to see the final versions of it here. I've had some that are unpainted. We did paint this hook in a black color. I've been throwing them without any paint on them. They've still been working super well for me. Now, I have caught hundreds of fish in testing on this rig just over the last like 3 or 4 months, and I have been just super anxious to get it out to you guys. We finally got the final product in, so definitely check these hooks out. They're going to be available at coretackle.com. They're going to be in other retailers soon as well, but we're launching them first on our website, coretackle.com. And this weedless Wacky shot hook is definitely something you need in your arsenal. A few applications I would recommend for it. Again, number 1 is going to be fishing offshore grass and offshore brush piles. In the wintertime, this is going to be a deadly rig, especially with more of like a shad pattern bait. This is just like a shad pattern Senko. And because we have 2 different sizes of this bait, an 1/8 ounce and a 1/28 ounce, you can really adjust the fall rate of that bait. As you get really cold water temperatures, 40 degrees, 38 degree water temperatures this winter, the 1/28 ounce with a Senko is going to have a super slow fall rate. And again, you can kind of hover that bait in the middle of the water column, whether that's on forward facing sonar or when you're just fishing, blind casting on bluff walls or points or places you throw a standard jerk bait, Alabama rig, stuff like that. And this bait is going to fall at like 1/2 foot a second, maybe even less depending on if you kind of keep a tighter line. And what'll happen then is that this is going to imitate a dying shad. When you have those shad kills and the water temperatures get below 45 degrees, throw this around bluff walls, throw this around boat docks, throw this around all the areas you would throw your standard, jerk bait, suspended jerk bait, winter style baits. And I think that you can catch them equally well, honestly, on like a shad pattern versus like a watermelon candy. I've been experimenting with both colors. I haven't seen it make a difference for me, at least from a Wacky rig standpoint. Both colors catch them just as well, so I don't know if the color is actually all that important. I think it's more that fall rate. So this lighter size 1/28 ounce is definitely gonna be better for shallower water applications as well. If you're skipping around shallow boat docks, shallow grass, kind of fishing it more like a weightless Wacky rig. That's kind of what this imitates, though it is just enough weight to keep that keeper on. We had to pour some weight to get that keeper to stay on, but it's just enough weight to be able to cast it well, let it sink just a little bit, but it doesn't sink that fast. And then the 1/8 ounce size is going to be better for those deeper applications. This is going to be great for deeper brush piles this winter. If you have fish in standing timber this winter that, again, you target with a Demiki rig, with a jerkbait Alabama rig, all of those places are going to be perfect for this weedless Wacky shot. You can also fish it later in the year when you find fish on just points that are staging up to spawn. You can work this bait in that 8 to 10 foot of water range around stumps, brush piles, rock piles, and especially offshore grass. This hook comes through grass so well, it's unbelievable. And I have caught a ton of fish. I think I had one day where I caught like 40 fish on one of these hooks on a small lake by my house that it's loaded with grass, and they were just on the outside edge of the grass. And I went around each grass edge and I was catching like 10 fish per grass edge, and I was getting this hook to come through clean every single time. In that situation, I was throwing the 1/28 ounce, but if the grass was deeper, the grass edge I think was like in 4 foot of water, so it wasn't super deep. But those grass edges are 15, 20 feet deep, whether that's on a lake up north or Tennessee River or whatever, this rig is going to absolutely destroy them, that 1/8 ounce size. And the 1/8 ounce size is also going to work if you fish offshore ledges, deeper areas, or if you just want to follow a faster fall rate when you're fishing up shallow. I know a lot of guys like to fish a faster fall rate on their Wacky rigs when they fish like a weighted Wacky hook. And if you're fishing boat docks that are in clear water, maybe 10 foot deep docks, that faster fall in that Wacky rig might be what you need to trigger a reaction bite. So either way, guys, that weedless Wacky shot is an awesome rig, holds your bait on better so you don't lose as many worms. You don't have to worry about split rings anymore with this deal. It comes through cover better than any weedless Wacky rig on the market, which was my goal from the start when I designed this thing. I was so frustrated with weedless Wacky rig hooks that weren't actually weedless and would get me hung up all the time. So this thing is going to get it done. It's going to work through cover, and you're going to have a great time with it. Definitely check out the new Core Tackle weedless Wacky shot hook over at coretackle.com, and relatively soon at least on some online retailers as well that carry Core Tackle products. Thanks for checking out the video, guys, and thanks for support. We'll see you guys in the next video.